June meeting to order. May I have the welcome notice from our Commissioner, Vicki Thompson?
A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the June 20th, 2019 Commission meeting was distributed June 18th, 2019 to appropriate groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Office staff and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
May I have adoption of, thank you. May I have adoption of agenda? Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Robin, would you please give us the invocation?
Yes. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another day to do your work in the great state of South Carolina. Help us to provide the very best services to assist all persons with disabilities and their families in our state. Amen.
Thank you. We have an introduction of guests. May I start in the front? With you.
I'm
No.
Tom McBurney, DDS.
No, let this beautiful young lady.
Oh, okay.
He's going to introduce, oh,
She
okay.
didn't
No,
want to
he is.
introduce herself,
All right,
Oh,
okay.
and she is my daughter.
Well, how wonderful. Thank you very much.
DDSN.
Okay, great.
Anna Vanderbilt, DDSN.
Rufus Perez, DDSN.
Pat Medley, DDSN.
Chris Clark, DDSN.
Chuck Norman, DDSN.
Deborah and Heather McPherson, Richland County.
Right.
And Joyce Davis, Brain Injury Association of South Carolina.
Nancy Hall, DDSN. Linda Lee, Witten Center Parents Club. I have a daughter at Witten Center.
Morning, with Kathleen Roberts, Witten Center Parents Club, and I had two sons there for 30 years, and they passed away, but we're still active.
Great.
I'm Roy Roberts, the other half, Witten Center.
We're so glad you're here. Get that techie guy over there to stand up for us.
techie guy.
Mark Cameron, DDSN.
Thank you, Mark.
Good morning, Ray Miller, DD Council.
Good morning, Phil Clarkson, Brain Injury Association, DD Council. I have a son with a traumatic brain injury.
Good morning, I'm Andrew Theron, I'm with DDSN.
Good morning, Evelyn Turner. I'm with the Disabilities Board of Charleston County.
Morning, Susan John with Horry County DSN.
Sean, East Suffolk County, Disability Special Needs.
Dana McConnell with the Center for Development Services in Greenville. Angela Rodriguez from the South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association.
Ansley Patrick, Autism Academy of South Carolina.
Terry Todd with Bright Start.
Michelle Schaefer, Max Abilities.
Troy Warren, Backpack Center.
Cynthia Williams, Calhoun County Disabilities.
Jerry Mize, the parent, the only Baptist in the room.
Anybody else back there? I can't see. Thank you very much. Welcome. May I have approval of the minutes from the May 16th, 2019 Commission meeting? Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second. Got the second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, public input. Dana McConnell.
Okay, Robin.
Well, good morning. I'm Dana McConnell with the Center for Developmental Services. I'm a private provider in Greenville, and we serve about 1,000 families. In 10 days, we will be at the go-live date of transitioning to a new funding system. On July 1st, all 46 providers of case management throughout the state will no longer receive a flat monthly fee to support our case management programs. Instead, our case managers must bill for their time in 15-minute increments for what is called fee-for-service. The rate established for this fee-for-service is not adequate, and it will ultimately result in the closure of most, if not all, providers in the state, and I want to prove that with some data. So the first chart I showed you has the yellow line on it. And using this first chart for just the month of May, you'll see that that yellow line represents 100% of where current funding models under the current monthly band rate match the new fee-for-service payment model. For the month of May, just last month, only 2 providers were able to hit this goal. All others, meaning 44 out of the 46 providers, would have lost money if this transition would have occurred on May 1st. Then on the back of that handout, that's where the orange line is. You'll see a 12-month history of that same data. On this graph, the blue bar represents the same data point as the previous graph for the month of May. But here you don't just see 1 month, but an entire year of how all providers would have fared if this new funding model was already in place. The arrows for each provider represent the range of each of their respective billings over the past 12 months. Here you'll see that only 4 providers, just 4, over the past 12 months, were able to generate enough billing units to hit that 100% mark, even one time. But what's interesting is that those same 4 providers cannot achieve that goal consistently, which is indicated by that range. So although a provider might be able to earn enough billing units for 1 month to cover their expenses, this graph shows that they would have lost in the next month. This picture also proves that despite all effort that all of us providers have made to increase our billing units over the past 12 months, none of the 46 providers would have been able to keep their billing at 100% on a consistent basis. These new rates are not sustainable. The fee-for-service rates were established in 2014, and those rates did not include supervision, training, quality assurance, or the infrastructure needed for a case manager to function, like having workspace, a computer with internet access, a phone line to do their work, and all the other expenses that come with running a legitimate business, like filing taxes, liability insurance, doing an audit. And what's worse is the rate has not even been adjusted for inflation over the past 5 years. So as the state authorizes other direct staff increases for salary, compression, health insurance, retirement, we, the case management providers, we get to earn that through additional billing units. Our team at CDS has been working tirelessly to get our productivity levels up in preparation for this July 1st change in funding. We've adapted to better utilize our in-house resources. We've purchased additional tools to help our case managers track their time. We've reassigned their caseloads based on zones and zip codes to streamline those home visits and cut down on mileage. We have restructured our payroll to better align with our expenses. And we've also stopped all new referrals so that we can dedicate more billable time to the clients we already have. But despite those efforts, we are only looking to receive 75% of the funding once these changes take place. We can't sustain our operations with a 25% loss. And for us, that's $27,000 every month. So like I said before, CDS is a private provider. We're also a nonprofit with no cash reserves. Our profit margin is only 1% of the current monthly payments. So if these rates are not increased, we will be forced to shut down. We can't afford to lose $27,000 per month. And we don't have the capacity to fundraise an additional $27,000 from the community to make up for that loss. These rates are not sustainable. Now, DDSN has made considerable efforts to help all the providers, including CDS, and I applaud that. They've offered trainings, technical assistance, which we took full advantage of. Ms. Poole even drove up to Greenville, and you spent 2 hours with our team. And we listened, we increased our productivity to the best that we could. We've implemented all those tips that she gave us. We also appreciate DDSN's help to bridge cash flow by providing a 60% safety net of funding for the first 90 days of transition. These efforts are to be commended, but the reality is we can't survive on 60% or the 75% that we're getting today. or anything less than 99%, because that's how tight our margins are for case management. And unfortunately, their approach has been to, let's just wait and see what happens. Within the first few months of July's transition, those providers with little to no cash reserves will close first, and it's likely that CDS will be in that group. A few months later, those in the rural areas and small providers will have to close their doors or be forced to refuse service to those in remote areas. Eventually, the only provider standing will be those who can rob from one of their other internal programs like early intervention or residential just to sustain case management. But then even that can't go on forever. And that's when families in South Carolina may no longer have a choice in providers. So my challenge to the commission today is to urge DHHS to increase the rates to a sustainable level. If that's not possible, or if HHS is unwilling to do so, then we need the commission to authorize DDSN to reinstate the flat monthly band rate for case management until the fee-for-service rates can be increased. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Evelyn Turner. I'm so glad to see you. I didn't know you were coming today.
I know, how are you?
Good. I'm from Charleston, and I used to be on her board.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on two topics this morning. My name is Evelyn Turner, and I have the privilege to serve as the Executive Director for the Disabilities Board of Charleston County. My first topic is on case management billing training, and this information is endorsed by Margie Williamson, Executive Director of the ARC of South Carolina, and Sloan Todd, owner of Pathfinder's Team Services. At the commission meeting on May 16th, it was noted that case management billing has increased over the past 2 months. However, it was not shared that the Case Management Committee of the Human Service Providers Association organized and executed 2 roundtable sessions that focused on maximizing billing opportunities. The first session was held on March 12th at the Human Service Providers Conference in Myrtle Beach. We had no idea if there would be any interest in this session. We were driven by the concerns we had regarding the lack of billing training being provided to the case managers across the state. We had 79 attendees. Case managers, case management supervisors, family support directors, and executive directors attended. The session was so well received that we were asked to repeat the session for staff that were unable to attend the conference. As a result, we held a second session on April 12th in Columbia. We had 77 attendees. Between the 2 sessions, the Case Management Committee interacted with 156 case management staff regarding case management billing. These sessions were methodically planned out by the Case Management Committee. The committee has 6 members and is made up of mostly former case managers who are now executive directors and owners of case management agencies. The committee represents over 75 years of case management experience in the DDSN system. To better illustrate the time, the effort, and the payoff of these sessions, please refer to the packet you were given. In the packet, you will find the session announcements, the agenda for each session, and most importantly, printed on pink paper, the evaluation for each session. Examples of the comments received are, so helpful and motivating. I no longer feel scared that I can't do this. Thank you to all the committee members for taking the time to work on this to help all of us be successful. Great job. Hopeful to meet the required reportable units. The evaluation comments, in our opinion, speak volumes to the desire case managers have for assistance in successfully navigating this new fee-for-service system. You also have 2 emails from providers giving feedback on this session. The email dated May 8th indicates a 12% increase in billing for that provider, and that provider attributes that to our roundtable session. I think we would be remiss to ignore the contribution these roundtable sessions had on the increase in case management billing over the past 3 months. But let me also say, while there have been increases, I'm still not confident as a system that we can sustain an appropriate billing level for survival. And my second topic, I'm going to switch totally. My second topic is the evacuation for Hurricane Florence. In response to the executive order calling for an evacuation due to Hurricane Florence, the Disabilities Board of Charleston County evacuated 179 individuals in service and 128 staff. We used 68 of our vehicles and rented a 15-foot U-Haul to transport equipment and supplies. Some of the examples of things that we transported: we took 4 pallets of air mattresses, 2 compressors to blow up the mattresses, sheets for over 300 people, blankets for over 300 people, pillows for everyone, adaptive eating utensils, canned foods for specialized diets, thickener for modified diets, food processors, adaptive equipment, cleaning supplies, incontinence supplies, and more. We stayed in 2 separate buildings owned by the Babcock Center, and I'm just going to go off script right now for 2 seconds because I know Thoyd is back here. I just have to tell you all, Thoyd and his crew at the Babcock Center are amazing. They are the most hospitable crew. They had staff with us in the buildings 24/7. We wanted for nothing. I mean, they gave us all of the sightseeing things in the town so that our folks weren't just sitting around. We wanted for nothing. They are amazing, and thank you so much for that. Most of us slept on air mattresses. We had a few hospital beds and some accessible cots for our folks who were more physically challenged or ill. We were gone for 6 days. The total cost of this evacuation to our agency was over $362,000. Most of the cost was staffing. Our sheltering overtime cost was over $277,000 because we had no way to rotate staff off shifts, and the scope of work is 24/7. Of course, this cost is above and beyond what we have paid for staffing in all of our houses if we were at home. As we did in 2016 for Hurricane Matthew, we applied for a FEMA grant to offset these expenses. In the past, FEMA has reimbursed us for the overtime related to the entire act of evacuating. For Hurricane Florence, FEMA is separating the cost into 2 categories. 1, evacuation, which is the travel time to and from, and sheltering, which is where we take refuge, the time that we're taking refuge. FEMA has informed us that they will only pay the overtime on the evacuation piece, the traveling, because per state policy, all sheltering activities are the legal responsibility of the respective county. Therefore, we are not eligible to apply for reimbursement. While Charleston County is very supportive of individuals living with disabilities, I would wager that they are not equipped or willing to add our population and our numbers into their sheltering facilities for the general public. We would easily overwhelm their system, and we understand evacuating our folks is our responsibility. In light of this new interpretation of state law, we will only receive reimbursement on the overtime accrued on travel. Keep in mind that both travel days fell at the beginning of a pay period. Therefore, there was very little overtime on travel. We anticipate reimbursement of $1,389 of the $277,000 we spent to pay staff for evacuating and taking care of our individuals. The Disabilities Board and 4 other providers are affected right now by this ruling, but who knows how many providers will be affected by the next flood, ice storm, or hurricane. The other providers, and I have notified Rufus, Britt, and Reed Marshall about this issue, and they have brought Mr. McBurney into the conversation, and we've been told that they are working with the South County Emergency Management folks to come to some sort of resolution on our behalf. We appreciate their work on this issue and hope for a positive outcome resulting in reimbursement for overtime cost. Without financial assistance and with hurricane season underway for 2019, we will have to carefully evaluate our ability to safely evacuate the individuals we serve. Remember, we were under a mandatory evacuation order by the governor. We did not make the decision to evacuate or incur these costs. This is a very big loss in revenue to our agency, and it will have an impact on the services that we can provide to the individuals we support. Thank you so much for allowing me the time to share with you the decisions we will be grappling with in light of the next mandatory evacuation notice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Susan John?
Hello. Hi, I'm Susan John with the Horry County Disability Special Needs, and I wanted to take an opportunity in an effort to try to explain to you why we in our system believe that the rate with case management is not functional. And I'm using Horry County as an example here. In understanding the current rate, the rate was developed in 2014. No adjustment costs for living have been have changed since the 2014 rate was in effect.
and it was based on $50,000 award per case manager. And I'm looking at the average of our case managers. The average case manager starts around $32,000 a year. In Horry County, our additional costs for benefits, retirement, FICA, Medicare, employer portion, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, and health and everything is around 42.57% of that $32,000. Keep in mind that different providers, that's going to be different. Private providers are going to be a little bit different than what we may have when we're affiliated with the state pension program as well as the state retirement system. You have to add in travel costs to that. Not everybody has the luxury of having vehicles for every case manager to go out and do home visits. We in Horry County have several vehicles, but we don't have enough vehicles for all the case managers and early interventionists to make those face-to-face home visits. So we are on average paying out about $150 to $175 per month per case manager in travel reimbursement costs. I was speaking with a private provider in this area, and they don't have any vehicles, and their average costs are around $300 to $350 per month per case manager in travel reimbursement costs. So you do a basic calculation of $32,000 a year plus the benefits at $13,622, $1,800 in travel costs, and you come up with $47,422 base costs. Now, if we're lucky and we add in that 2% increase that the case managers, hopefully we will adjust their salary by 2% because it's legislatively mandated, that adds another $948 to that, bringing the total to $48,370. The problem with that calculation is that doesn't include buildings, it doesn't include rent, it doesn't include copy machines, phones, any of that overhead that we have to allocate to that base cost of the case manager. Factor in too, who's going to supervise this case manager? Who's going to hire in case the case manager decides to leave at some point? What happens if somebody goes on FMLA? What happens if they want to take a vacation? So those costs aren't even factored into that base cost of case management. Quite honestly, and Dana said it very articulately, that the rate does not support, it doesn't support supervision, it doesn't support training, FMLA, vacation hours, or the time that it takes to train a case manager. It truly takes 6 months for a case manager truly to get up and functional. So as you think about, as we move to fee for service and we have a brand new case manager, those first 2, 3, 4 months, there's the likelihood of them supporting their position financially is very minimal and almost impossible. The basic calculations are based on $1,550 for non-face-to-face and $2,520 for face-to-face. In Horry County, we're asking our case managers to generate $41.66 just for their position per month. If you add in the costs associated with all the other things that aren't calculated in the previous calculations, the supervisor, the building, the phones and all of that, we are asking them to generate $6,500 per month per case manager to support the program. It has been said by multiple people, that the state director as well, that the rate is sustainable and that providers have an opportunity to make $100.80 an hour, that we need to change our business model. And I don't disagree with changing our business model, because there are things that we did to try to reduce our overhead costs. But if we look at a scenario of how this is calculated, let's say a case manager goes on a home visit. It takes them 1 hour to travel to that place. Takes them an hour. They're going to spend an hour at that home doing the stuff that they need to do to address the needs of that family, and they travel an hour home. That travel time on the front end and that travel time on the back end is non-compensable. So we're making $100.80 for 3 hours of time. So that's not $100 an hour. That's $33.66 an hour. That's very different than what we continue to hear is $100.80 an hour time. That's not even factoring in the fact that we have to case note what we've done and do the paperwork, which is, again, non-compensable time. So that's the challenges that we are facing as to why we don't feel the rate, or why the rate is challenging to all of us in the room. There are many activities that aren't billable. Orientation and training, travel, assisting with Medicaid eligibility, Social Security benefits, enrollment in Medicaid waivers, SIS interviews, Alliant reviews, person-centered training, case noting. Those are all non-compensable time that takes a lot of time out of the efforts of the case manager. There's external audits that are required by DDSN. That takes time on some of the case management supervisors' parts, or in Dana's case, I'm sure on her part as the administrator of a private organization. I think that what's challenging is that DDSN boards were established legislatively. And I think the challenge that DHHS has is that when they've had contracts with other entities to provide services, they've never had to deal with someone who's tied to the state retirement system and the state pension plan. And so those rates are going to vary significantly with those factors that are factored in that some of us have and some private providers don't have. One of the things that I would ask and urge that you all to consider is that in order for this rate to be sustainable, I don't know whether or not DHHS is going to be willing to change the rate, but can we not advocate for a travel reimbursement component? If we had the travel reimbursement component alone, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. But travel is a huge amount of time that we do that's necessary for us to do the face-to-face visits, but we're not being paid for that amount of time. And so I'm urging you as a commission to please consider talking to DHHS, advocating on our behalf that one component alone, I think, could make a significant difference in having these discussions on a monthly basis as to why case management isn't as sustainable as it needs to be in our state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deborah McPherson, excuse me.
First, I want to say I appreciate the speakers before me, and I did not talk to them before preparing my remarks. So my remarks were made and prepared before coming to the meeting today. Today, you will be considering the community provider contracts for next fiscal year. 2 years ago, the Commission for the first time was given detailed contract information for each provider. It was through that information that it was revealed that 2 providers were receiving funding in their community contracts for day program mortgages. One private case management provider was receiving funding for an office mortgage. Questions were raised at the commission meeting held in Georgetown, and some of you were there. While one of the providers had received funding from service dollars for over 10 years, totaling over $1 million for its day program building, rather than those costs being funded through capital improvements. And Tom Waring was there at the time and indicated that he would look into the matter. Well, today, 2 years later, you're still being asked to approve community contract funding for these 2 providers, Jesco and Charleston, to receive service dollars for day program mortgage expenses. It appears that the funding for the private case management provider's office lease is being proposed to be deleted, so you don't find that being included. I would encourage you to ask why DDSN is continuing to propose to use $157,720 in service dollars to fund these 2 providers' mortgage expenses. By continuing to fund these mortgages with service dollars rather than using these funds as match, you're losing over $500,000 in funding that could be used for direct services for people with disabilities and their families. And I'm certainly not advocating that these day program mortgages not be covered. It's just they need to be covered with capital improvements, not service dollars. Finally, we're at the 11th hour. In 10 days, DHHS will be implementing the market rate for case management. For several months, you've heard from service providers, case managers, and families that this change is going to be devastating to the service delivery system. Individuals and their families, especially those living in rural areas and those with complex medical needs, are being told that they will not be able to keep their case manager, that they developed a relationship and know their needs because it's projected that the provider will lose money continuing to serve them. There are many case manager vacancies because some case managers have decided to find other employment rather than wait to see what happens, especially when the financial projections look so dismal. Today, you're being given data that shows the average reduction in revenue per consumer using the market rate would have been $43 less per consumer, or more than $500,000 statewide in May. As commissioners, you can just sit back and assume that you have no authority to do anything about this projected loss because it's a Medicaid service and the responsibility of DHHS to set rates. However, as a former DDSN commissioner, I would encourage you as a commission to send a letter to the governor with a copy to the director of DHHS, the Senate Finance and House Ways and Means Committees, expressing your concerns of the negative impact these changes will have on the service delivery system for people with disabilities and their families. I would encourage you to ask DHHS to confirm with CMS the case management activities that are not allowable for billing. And I ask you that because I've found many times DHHS and this agency have said that things that CMS did not say, did not approve, and I'm just saying, you need to confirm that. And whether adjustments in the rates can be made for excessive travel times considering the rural nature of our state. We have many people in our state that are living in some areas that are very difficult to get to. If they don't have a case manager, they don't have access to services. And you're going to be hearing about that as commissioners. So you have a responsibility as commissioners to at least notify those people with authority and responsibility that this is going to affect negatively our service system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners update? Any commissioners update? No, okay. The policy committee update? Vicki Thompson, please.
Okay. Give me a second here. Terrible. Okay, so the policy committee met and discussed the new waiver case management policy, the non-waiver case management standards, and the directive on discharge planning. And I'm going to ask Susan to jump in if I'm leaving things out. But is everybody reviewed? I know we sent out the public comment. We sent the cleaned up version just yesterday, but basically it's what we talked about in the policy committee meeting. I think all of you were there. So just slow me down. Okay. All right, so this is basically about pulling out the waiver case management from the non-waiver case management services. So there were a lot of comments. We had a lot of robust discussion, but the staff had resolved most of the issues before we even got into the policy committee. So the first one, the new waiver case management standard, which is the policy here first. But we can do that directly first. Okay, so the first thing in your number 3 is the discharge planning for individuals leaving ICS and enrolling in waiver programs. So the main change and discussion was about changing resident or legal guardian to resident and personal representative. So everything else was just minor changes to complement the new waiver services. So the committee recommendation is that we approve the directive as changed for this.
And do I need a motion on each individual one, or can we vote on it collectively?
Either way you want to do it.
I don't know. And
I think it's up to you all, if you want to take them as a package or if you want to do them individually.
you want to just explain them and then we'll vote them together?
Yeah.
Okay, since it comes from committee, really doesn't need a,
Okay, so you're going to have
I need
to
a
flip
sec.
through like 5 pages and there aren't any full page numbers until you get into the case management standards.
It's a big sheet, it's one pager.
okay.
Okay, so these are the case management standards that do not apply to home and community-based service waiver participants. And these were mostly just about separating out the two components, and there were no substantial changes to this one, and the committee recommends passing as written. The next one is, I don't know who, is the new waiver case management standards. And this was also about pulling these out. And one thing that came up with that needed to be followed up on was the retention record for case management records was 6 years. And it was based on archives law, and DHEC requires medical records to be retained for 10 years. So we discussed that, and y'all were gonna see if that might be a more appropriate record retention time frame. But you haven't done it yet, right?
We have looked into that, and we pulled the policy from SC Archives, and the length of time to retain the type of records we have follows a 7-year requirement, so 6 full years. So that's why we're following that. Also, it's in our contract with DHHS, articulating that that's the period of time we'll retain them.
Okay.
So that's why that time limit's in there.
Yeah, I just think that case management records are part of the medical record. So the medical records have to be retained for 10 years. It would be better to retain them for 10 than retain them for 6. But I don't know all the time wrong with that, but in the future, just keep that in mind, because we could get into a problem if we don't, Another thing that came up was the non-billable activities when the person is in the judicial system. And that's a legitimate concern. And y'all were going to ask HHS room on that one.
And we did, and that was definitely a no.
That was a big no.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the policy will be here that if we have someone in judicial, then we can go ahead and approve state-funded case management, because that's up to us.
And that's
So that he,
currently.
yeah, that's.
It just wouldn't be something that CMS would allow. So
These were comments from providers.
Right. And we had spoken to providers about this too. They know that.
There's another way.
That there's another way to fund it. Yep.
Okay, the other issue was that case managers can't read mail to families, so we changed that to unless it helps them achieve their goals in the plan, or some language like that. So some of the non-billable things, if we could tweak those a little bit to guide people in the right direction. We don't want a case manager to go out there and say, sorry, but I can't read this to you. So just to say, this is related to the plan, so I'm going to read this to you, or whatever. So, and being able to focus more on being able to build more of what we do. So, I did have the opportunity to meet with Director Baker and Senator Alexander and Senator Coney 2 weeks ago. I understand his position, Director Baker's position about the rate. He's convinced that that rate is comparable for comparable services in other areas of the state. He's having a hard time going back in and changing the plan that was written and presented, because he feels that if you break it down, it looks like some kind of a similar amount that other people are getting to do comparable services. So that's his challenge. But I did point out to him that South Carolina was a very rural state, and he did say, and I said, people aren't going to have access if they don't have access to a case manager. And I think my congressional district is one of the most rural in the country, and it's, it's Oconee, Pickens, Anderson, McCormick, Saluda, all that. So there's a real challenge in that area. So he said, yeah, I'll work with you on that, and other things like that. So, I think we have to focus on what we're going to bill for. We can focus on the rate. I didn't get any indication there was any negotiation on there. There is a way to negotiate what we bill for. So when we write these standards, we had that meeting, I want to make sure that they know that they can bill for this if it relates to their plan and the goals in the plan. And I don't know enough about case management to go through those others like that. I've got plenty of people that do, and one that was a case manager sitting here. So, surely we can look at it again and just make sure we're going in hitting for everything that we can bill for. If they're having to do, we need to try to get a way to get reimbursed for that, because that would help a lot, and that would especially help it, in travel. But this is the new waiver case management standards that they need to operate effective July 1st. And these are the non-waiver case management standards divided out. And this is the directive on discharge planning for people leaving ICS and enrolling in waiver programs. We were only able to get to these three. It took a solid hour of really going over them thoroughly, but, and we have a big list kind of coming up next month, but we will get to it. So, from the committee, we're moving that these be approved as presented.
Do you have any questions, discussion? Do I have a motion? Coming from committee, I don't need a second. Okay. All right, so you have a motion for this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any noes? Great, thank you very much. I appreciate all your hard work for doing that. Mr. Rob McBurney, could you tell us about the Golden Palmetto Award?
Okay, good morning. For more than 40 years, the Golden Palmetto Award has been presented to a county government in South Carolina that has demonstrated most exemplary support for people with disabilities during the previous year. At the first of the year, we honored the city of Aiken with the 2018 Silver Palmetto Award, and that's presented to a municipal government that provides outstanding services to people with disabilities. Partnerships between local disabilities agencies and city and county councils increase and promote many opportunities for people with disabilities, especially in employment and community inclusion. These partnerships increase the integration of individuals with disabilities into their communities and create opportunities to build relationships and foster friendships. We want to thank the DSN board, executive directors across the state who work hard to cultivate these and maintain these active partnerships in their county governments and to benefit the individuals with disabilities. These individuals these efforts are to be commended and celebrated, and that's what we're going to do with the Golden Palmetto Award. The Golden Palmetto Award is DSN's way of thanking county governments for their leadership. The South Carolina Association of Counties is kind enough to allow DDSN to recognize and honor the winning county at their annual meeting each year, and this year we invite as many commissioners as possible that can attend on August 5th in Hilton Head, where we will present it to the winning county. So in that vein, we are pleased to recommend for your approval Fairfield County for 2018.
Wonderful.
The Fairfield County government has consistently given immeasurable support to the Fairfield County Disabilities and Special Needs Board and promoted employment for people with disabilities and special needs for 36 years. The board has work contracts with Fairfield County to operate a recycling center, maintain lawns, and provide janitorial services to county buildings, including the Fairfield County Health and Human Services Complex for DSS and DHEC. And the Palmetto Family Primary Health Care Center. Many individuals of the day program are employed as a result of these contracts, and county officials lend their support to attendance for agency functions throughout the year, particularly during the proclamation signing for Disability Awareness Month, open houses, picnics, and fun day activities. Not only does Fairfield County government provide financial support, but they also provide in-kind support as well. They provided topsoil, landscape residential facilities. They donated a parcel of land for future expansion for the Fairfield County Board, and they allow a board liaison to county council, which is important for communication and just awareness for what the county, so the county council knows what the Fairfield County Board is doing. In 2018, Fairfield County also provided several truckloads of free mulch, gravel, and grading for a circular drive at one of the CTH2s, and also provided $43,000 in funding for that. The County of Fairfield's genuine concern for individuals we serve deserves honor recognition for their exemplary commitment to people with disabilities and special needs. It is our recommendation for your approval for Fairfield County to receive the 2018 Golden Palmetto Award.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Move that we accept the recommendation.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Congratulations, Fairfield County. Glad y'all doing so well. All right, Rob, you want to continue with the legislative update?
I'm going to continue with the legislative update. That's very short. We are done.
Yep.
For the year. They are out of town. The budget was agreed upon on May 21st by the conference committee, signed by the governor, and we survived the governor's vetoes. So the rest of the budget update I will leave to Chris Clark. He's good with the numbers, so I will leave all that for him, and move on to 3 bills that became 1 bill, 3825, Senate Bill 529, and House Bill 3602. We were able to come together and fix some confusion in the Adult Health Care Consent Act at the end of the session. I want to thank P&A for helping out, the State Bar, the Hospital Association. All of us worked together with Tom Young, Senator Tom Young from Aiken, Senator Tom Davis from Beaufort, Representative Merle Smith from Sumter, and in particular, the sponsor of Bill 3602, Representative Seth Rose from Columbia. It was a team effort to get that thing done the last week of the session, and we had a good result, and I think we have a good statute going forward as a result. So I just want to thank all those folks for getting that done and working together in kind of the best spirit of cooperation between agencies and concerns.
Thank you.
So the result of that is we have fixed the Adult Health Care Consent Act, and we are in the priority for it now. Going forward next year, you've got some bills that we're going to be watching. Those are not the only ones. There'll also be some bills pre-filed for next year. We're going to work on employment. We'll also look to work on our regulations, getting our regulations updated and to the General Assembly. So that's it for right now.
Thank you.
I'll give you an update as pre-filing goes in December.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right.
Enjoy your kind of vacation. Mr. Chris Clark. Budget update. Welcome aboard. I have not met you yet. Nice to have you. This is great.
Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Super.
Hope I can do this justice as my first act.
Sounds like you need to find more money.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was a drawer full when I went in Lisa's office that she was stashing, so we're all good now.
All right.
We found it. It's in the couch.
First thing I'd like to comment on is, basically as a state agency, you guys have adopted a spending plan versus a true operating budget. So we are, Nancy Rumbaugh, Pat, and Rufus and I, and of course our finance team, we're really trying to move towards a true operational budget. And we plan on presenting that, working on that in February and presenting that in May or June prior to the year actually starting, which is the proper way to do budgeting. So we're already starting that process. We're trying to get through all these contracts and all, but actually next week we're going to begin that. We're actually going to take a zero-based budget approach at the regional centers and start from scratch. Rufus is great with the numbers out there, and Nancy Hall, is going to be key there as well. And then of course we're pulling in engineering and planning so that we can properly project maintenance needs, which has not been done, I don't think, in the past. So we're going to do a lot more granular approach. The other reason we need to do this is for the administrative contract. If we're going to go that direction, we got to really have a good feel for what our costs are and what we need. Not only what we're spending, but what we're going to need as we move to that approach or to that type of funding system. Part of this, I guess, in the past, y'all been notified as far as the provider side of this. We did get a memo out to them about the dollar increase of 2%, the compression in the state retirement, 1% employer rate. The real issue here, remains with the case management and EI, which I think Mary's going to speak to later, and how that's going to be handled, as well as there's a timing issue related to when we get our money that we can turn around and give those funds to the providers. So that's always been an issue apparently. So we're looking at August or September before we'll know those numbers, and Chuck Chuck won't even be here to help with that actually. His last day's in August, so we'll be calculating all those rates for QPLs and the providers. So that was the budget update, unless y'all have questions.
Good. You want to go ahead with the financial update?
Yes, this is under tab 6. Again, this is the format that's been used. Again, I'll be reviewing this. I think Pat created this, and I'll be looking at it and trying to see if there's any better way to present any of this information. Of course, this is only expense approach. This is only the expenditures. So you don't have anything here on revenues at all. So of course, if our revenues are falling short, you know, then even if our expenses are being controlled, which they are, we've got, if you look under year-to-date actual expenses column, 89.82% of our budget has been expended, and that's off the spending plan, not off of our approved appropriation or authorization level. If we were spending at the target would be 91.67, so we're actually below where we need to be. The problem is we have some revenue issues. So we're having to work on that. That's why we're having financial problems is on the revenue side.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
ma'am. Why don't we show the revenues?
I don't know. Pat and I will work on that. This is, again, something that's been created, I guess, out of Nancy's area for us, but we do need to look at that. We need to do a full income statement type approach, and even cash.
I thought we used to always have one that, Pat, we always had one that showed our revenue.
We showed cash position, but not revenue. The revenue, what we do starting in December is we do, it's a very complex process to forecast our revenue for the year because of all the varying transactions. So as we go through, we're capturing that number. We just don't put it in a piece of paper, and then when I briefed it for the last year, I'll do the expenses, and then I'll give you the caveat that we have checked our cash flow revenues and that they're sufficient to meet our needs. But I think as we go forward, we need a better forecasting tool. But when we start, if you saw the forecasting tool, what it takes to get a forecast, it is quite an elaborate process. And we don't mind presenting it, it's just overly complex. And so we've always just given you the verbal assurance that we have adequate revenues to cover our expenses.
Okay. But what we used to show is just how much cash we
Just cash.
All right, okay.
Which is not reflective of the risk of not having revenues.
Yeah.
Speaking of cash, I want to thank Tom Ritter and his staff for really working really hard to try and make sure that we remain in a positive position. We're about as close to zero as you can be in June without going negative. So that's, a real issue. So thank goodness July is right around the corner, and we'll start over. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. We got to make sure that we don't take another step down in our cash like we did the last, I guess, 3 years. We've just gradually depleted the cash because of a lot of the state funding and things out there going on. So we're aggressively looking at that and working towards that. And I am losing my my finance director in July. He has resigned. He's at retirement age. So he's been thinking about it for a while, and I guess felt like it was time to do that. So that's going to be fun, trying to replace him. But I don't know if y'all know Tom or not, but I just want to thank him publicly for all he's done for the agency. He replaced Marty Rawls. If y'all know her.
Thank you.
That's the financial update.
All right, we need a motion on the financial update.
So moved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thanks. Chris, thank you so much. How about the community provider contracts?
Sure. Again, first I'd like to thank my staff that really busted tail to get this stuff done. I was not hired until, I guess, June 3rd. Typically this process begins in May. And it was sitting idle until I got in my seat. So Chuck, Casey, and Deborah, Chuck's here, Casey and Deborah are not. But I want to thank them for all the effort they made to make this happen, because it was not easy. So first I want to get that out of the way. Under tab 7, you have basically two sets of information. One is the more higher level information, and then the provider level details behind that, which is 67 pages. That's something I guess y'all started getting last year, and I'll hit both of these. And with the provider level detail, I did write this memo that's in here that hopefully helps you understand some things. Because of course there's a lot of numbers there, and trying to make sense of them is pretty difficult even when you know what's going into it. So the first packet has agency budget for community contracts at the top, very first page under tab 7. There's some format changes here I made to make it, I think, easier to understand. And then we've added some explanations at the bottom, which you basically have to have a microscope to read. But I wanted to hit kind of some explanations here. So there's basically two broad sections. You've got the normal standard contracts that we've always had at the top section, and at the bottom, the fee for service. And I broke that out because it's really throwing comparative numbers when you're just looking at like day services and so forth. So in the bottom section, you got case management, early intervention, and then some other things that I'm going to get into when I start explaining the difference and why it shows we're going down $10 million in total. That's just not entirely accurate when you consider what's going into those numbers. So basically, the biggest issue is when we're dealing with the original contract for last year, 2019, keep in mind this was done in May, June timeframe, so the raises that took effect in July 2018 were not in those originals, but they're in the originals for this year. Just like this year's July increase is not in this year's numbers, but they'll be in opening 2021 numbers. So that's approximately $30 million in additional funds when you see these big increases. But contributing to the net decrease at the bottom, we're losing BabyNet. 0 to 3 years is going to HHS. We're estimating that to be about $14 million. So that's coming out. If you look at the early intervention line, they're under that second section. And then the HASKI waiver direct build, I really didn't understand why that was in the budget. It is in our budget, but this is supposed to be community contracts with providers. They don't pay HASKI waiver direct build. It comes directly out of our money, doesn't pass through their books at all. So kind of putting it in here is very distorting. It has nothing to do with community contracts, but it is our expense. Same with intake. We don't do contracts for intake. That's just as intakes occur. Now, Vicki, I know you asked about respite and why it's duplicated last year in last year's commission meeting. If you look up in the top section, there's a respite admin line. That's actual administrative cost that's not duplicative. That's built in up there, but at the bottom is the actual respite rollover grants for Charles Lee and Jasper. And that is down there to keep it from distorting
It's very helpful.
the total numbers.
I really appreciate the way you pulled all that out and then did the explanation at the bottom, because it was time consuming to look at all that. But it explains everything that you're putting on here, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm open to suggestions too. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible for the user to understand this. Also, I want to note that some contracts are being reviewed. That's on the agenda later as well. Trying to really make sure that the contracts we have that are not, the provider contracts, the more non-service ones, or the special grants are being reviewed. And some of them have been extended for 3 months just so that we can buy 90 days to look at it. Of course, we anticipate most of those getting extended, but we want to look at what are the reportable requirements and what are the service delivery requirements, and ensuring that services are there to support those contracts. And then the second page behind that, it has the number of individuals there, and just like Pat reported last year. By the way, I watched last year's commission meeting on this to make sure it's on YouTube. The number of individuals here is duplicative. Keep in mind that we have head count for persons receiving services, and they can be in more than one category. So you may have somebody that's in residential and day and case management, for example. So keep that in mind when you look at those numbers. And then the provider level detail starts after page 11, what I just went over.
So, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Go back a second. All right, the case management number dropped, number of individuals served. Because last year we approved 12,000, so it dropped by like 1,000. Is that the early intervention? I mean, why would it drop? We approved.
The actual number of people served?
The people served last year was 12,868 on the contract
For case management?
for case management.
Well, the 11,
There's 1,000 less.
the 11,867, Chuck did a dump from May, right?
Right.
All the May.
That's all the cases we had as of May 1.
So I'm just, what I'm after.
Why,
here
it dropped
is-
1,000?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, is it because there's already a lack of access or?
No, I don't think
Okay.
that's.
If you're in a waiver, you have to have case management. It could be, I don't know if does this include state-funded case management, any form of case management, or just waiver?
Just waiver case management.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't include the folks that they're printing that invoice
Right.
for to send in and get funding.
So basically, it would just be, we'd have to look up to see why, but it's not lack of
Well,
access, because they have to have a case manager. It could just be lack of.
If you
number
look
of
at
people in
last
there.
year's, the same information on the same format was presented with 1,000 more people. So, yeah, we kind of need.
Can we look into it and come back?
Yeah,
next meeting?
yeah, just, and the
Glad
same
to
with
look into
family
that.
support. There are 1,850 people than last year. But just,
Um,
see.
before you go on, I'll go back to that previous page. Chris and I have been talking a lot, we'd like to do a lot of comparisons between years. And when he's getting ready to start putting items, as he did here, in the correct categories and on the correct pages, it gets harder and harder to do a comparison with previous years unless you go back and do all those corrections for all those other years, which we do not want to do. So once we get the format that we'll be presenting from this point on and having things where they need to be reported, then we can assure you that those numbers are good. I would really like to say that we'd probably need to go back and look at the number that was presented last year to make sure it was a good number.
Right, it might not have been.
And,
But there's a significant drop in both.
yeah, and family support funds, with the more waiver cases you get, the less people are accessing family supports because the
maybe
services are there. That's what we're seeing, and that's why there's a huge amount of family support funds sitting out there unused with providers that we're looking at now as to trying to recoup that back into the agency so we can reallocate it properly. We need to look at the formula, how we're allocating that. If you're not using it, it shouldn't just sit out there year after year not being used. And that it can be better funded doing something else. So while we look at things like the caregiver relief program, and we're saying, well, we're going to do away with that. No, we're going to reallocate our family support funds that are not being used to take over that. So that we're not having to have a special contract going for that. We can just say, you need family support dollars to do this service for these people.
People are getting it.
They're getting it. It's just, we're trying to clean up having all these ancillary contracts sitting out there that we don't know what the deliverables are. So we're in the process of doing that. And there's quite a few. So many of them, and Pat gets to talk about that, we're extending for 3 months because I don't want to just say no without doing the proper due diligence. But at some point, we do have to make sure that the reporting's correct. Like a lot of these contracts, they were reporting maybe at the end of the year, not always. So we're going to quarterly reporting. We're asking for more information to make sure that the program that we're paying for has got an outcome to it. Sorry.
Also, based on your question, we will update that sheet for next year and add comparative information as well as explanations. So when y'all receive this, you'll have that answer. We won't be grappling and
That's good.
looking for answers. Because I'm sure there's a legitimate answer, it's just I don't have it.
Okay.
I think so too, and it could just very well be the number was wrong. I mean, it could be as simple as that. So we got to look at it.
Well, if you look back here, it looks like it's down 800,000. If you look at the year before, it says it was down 800,000, so that could be 1,000. So anything else on that contract?
Well, just the provider level detail, we did add some information to it. If you look at page 1, Again, I don't know why last year, this is to Mary's point, in the 2019 column, they didn't report case management in the contract numbers, which I don't know why. But these numbers are what was reported to you. We added case management to the current year numbers because that's contracts, and those are people being served. And so you can see that broken out, because if we had just given you the total, you know, you'd have seen 27,000 versus 19,000 and been like, what's going on? And so those are broken out, and then we added variance columns to everything, because I think last year y'all were asking about that as well, is it would be nice to have those variants so you didn't have to do it in your head. The biggest change, though, if you start going through the provider numbers, is the addition of case management and EI being pulled out for BabyNet. So that affected our numbers a lot, because we're no longer serving those birth to 3 children in our numbers.
Our providers are
That's probably
providing the EI portion of it.
We know that.
Family support.
She has a question, Lori?
It's just, what are these individual community contracts that serve like 1 or 2 people total? ECM consulting, Heart and Hand, do you know what those are? That serves 1 client or 2 clients?
CGM serves 1 person.
Supervised living, and they also do employment.
Say, Rufus, speak up, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
One of the providers provides residential services and also employment services.
Okay.
The other is a newly established residential provider.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple other points if you don't mind.
Sure, no, please.
So we did not build bed vacancies into this because we want to represent to you what contracts are going out the door today. Our providers are going to go to Chuck's office here in a minute and grab their contracts. So we'll have to come back through y'all and get, if it's over 200,000, and get your approval. But you know, that might look like bed development, but we will let you know if it's bed development. I don't think we're doing any bed development right now. So the issue is we're trying to represent to you what contracts are going out the door. That's what this whole topic is. And so we do not, and it hasn't been in there in the past. The bed vacancies weren't in there previously either. But we did discuss that and to figure out, we might want to add a blurb about how many bed vacancies there are and how much money that represents. We will do all the community contracts are based on May 1st data, which means it's old, that we had to start the process. We will do a mid-August, if earlier possible, true up for all the change in census for folks being served, and providers will get an amendment and a payment for those adjustments. And then hopefully in early September, we can get the amendment done for the raises. Again, we don't usually find out till end of August, according to Nancy Rumbaugh, our budget director. So until we get that money, we can't even begin to project it. I think that's it.
All right, thank you. I need a motion for the community provider contracts. Sure, absolutely.
This Greenwood Genetics, $12 million, I'm looking at page 4 of 67 under special grant.
You just close it.
And there are all, a bunch of different line items that are specific to Greenwood Genetics. Can somebody just explain to me what that is? And we didn't live here at the time my son was diagnosed, but I understand that people go to Greenwood Genetics for testing. And I guess what I'm wondering is that something that the state has to pay for? Cannot people, if it's diagnostic services or genetic testing, your health insurance will pay for that. So why is the state paying for that?
You don't have health insurance.
And if you don't have health insurance, Medicaid will pay for it, and you get federal matching dollars. So why are we paying for it directly with state funding, if that's what it is?
Pat, can you explain that?
I would say, well,
They have very strong.
I would say that we're meeting with Greenwood Genetics next week, because we believe that these 6 contracts are overly complex. But when you look at the history, that $12 million is really like $5 million of state funds, of which there's matching. And there is Medicaid matching in there.
Okay.
Some of it's research, which is pure state dollars. Some is administrative, where we get a 50-50 match, and some of it is Medicaid services, of which they generate Medicaid revenue in order to turn $5 million into $12 million. But we believe, as a new team here, our comfort level is a little higher than yours, but less than where it needs to be. And so we're going to meet with them next week, and we're going to try to get them organized. In our 16 cost settlement, which turned out very well, we had very little payback. These contracts had paybacks because we didn't have the expenditures lined up, so we have some work to do with them to juggle those contracts. But I do believe we will probably maybe revise them to make them simpler and cleaner going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm not.
You also need and I'm great, I've been on the board and they have the strongest lobbyists of legislatures I've ever seen in my entire life. And this year, they just got an extra $2 million.
Every year there's this line that just pops up. They're getting
And they just got an extra $2 million. And I said, why? They said, well, do you know Senator So? I said, yeah. I said, because he put it in there. Sorry. And I think they're wonderful. They do fabulous work, but it is amazing that how it's handled. I'm sorry, that's one of my little concerns.
I just want to make sure it's something that should be state dollars as opposed to tapping into other funding resources for some of it.
I was just going to say, my family utilized the benefit of Greenwood Genetics when my son was in intervention, and it's written in, I believe, that baby net providers need to ask families if they want genetic testing when there is a delay. I know services, at least that's how it was when we started it 8 years ago. And so they offered it to us and then set the appointment up and had an evaluation, which in turn was to a genetic diagnosis that we might not have gotten otherwise or later in life. And so for our family, it was really instrumental.
So I'm glad you shared that. That makes total sense. And the same thing happened with our family, but we lived in Virginia. And so the doctors, the early interventionists said, do you want genetic testing? We said, we do. And so we went to Children's Hospital and our insurance paid for it. The state didn't pay for it. Our insurance paid for the genetic testing.
Yeah. So because we were in BabyNet, and all of our services were covered, therapies, that was the way it was presented to me was the genetic testing is also covered. So it seemed like it was through the BabyNet. Like we didn't have to worry about getting out our insurance to get the genetic testing done.
And if the child is Medicaid, it is billed to Medicaid.
Yeah.
So everything that's going through Greenwood, as much as possible, is being billed. It's just a matter of getting them a little more organized and get those contracts a little simpler so we could increase that billing. So it's not state dollars.
Are they also billing private health insurance or are they only billing?
They're supposed to be, yes.
They're supposed to, and they're supposed to be fundraising.
My husband's on that board too.
And it's just amazing. It's amazing that, because of course, I go to Greenwood Genetic and it's unbelievable. And then I go to the Postal Center and I get mad. So that's my feeling. But go ahead.
Certainly pursue that question. We'll meet Dr. Skinner next week to make sure that that is taking place.
I just would like more money for us. And, sorry.
I've got a few questions on the contracts.
Okay. That's what Chuck's here.
Okay, we do still have those 2 mortgages, and I'm wondering, have we checked the outstanding balances and how much of that goes to interest and,
I can jump in here.
Is that?
is it smart for us to?
We looked, my presentation later on, I'll talk about.
I think that, yeah.
We looked at those 2 mortgages in particular, I spoke, just to get the history. When it comes to the Charleston mortgage, the first backdrop, and you guys are probably telling me something you already know. This agency has a history of funding either wholly or substantially day programs. That is the pattern and practice of DDSN. In the Charleston's case, it was just before the recession. DDSN had committed to support the capital funding of their day program. The recession hit, and then there was an arrangement where rather than us capitally fund it, they would get a mortgage and we would pay the mortgage, and it would expire in approximately 4 years. We looked at that, and it came up in the Senate hearings. Senate hearings basically was clear to us, act more like a contractor relationship as opposed to parental relationship. And I think this is a legacy issue that we were told,
It
we were
is.
told 2 years ago not to do it. We're not doing it, but I believe.
You're not
we-
doing it again.
No,
No,
we
we
are
have-
obligated to finish.
obligations.
And when it came to Chesco, it's a similar circumstance where literally, I think it had to do with somewhere in the mid-2000s, there was issues with addressing issues at Babcock, and there were some people in the northern part of the county being served. And we literally went to Chesco and asked them to run this day program for us. And they initially turned us down. Their board turned us down. So we really, as an agency, marketed to them, please help us. And then we agreed to do the funding. And it's a very similar thing, from a cash flow perspective, we agreed to pay the mortgage as opposed to capital outlay.
I mean, because you could go to the General Assembly and into the CHIP account and say, we need this for that, and, and just get rid of it, get rid of the debt. As an option. But you would have to go get it approved.
We'd have to get the capital to pay for it.
You would, but there may be places. I'm just saying, if you're looking for money,
Yes, I agree.
that would be a good place to start because of the interest.
And I know we're talking about Chesco and Charleston, but we also should be noticed, if you notice on the Rich Lex contract, there's a rent payment of $124,000 a year too. So it's not just these two agencies, it's also that one, and these were obligations, and we're trying to see how to, those are written obligations.
Well, all of this is kind of a band
A
rate
legacy.
problem. It's just a band rate problem. And then on community options, I just want to point out that there's a pretty wide variation between reimbursement for SLP1.
Between what?
SLP1 programs. Community options, it has 2 people and 55,000 a year. Most of the time in SLP1, you're looking at around 20,000. So, maybe there's a reason for it.
It could depend on the individuals they have in this program.
Well, part of that is the increase in
SLP1
direct, you're talking taking the 111 divided by 2.
Yeah.
Built into that increase is the dollar compression and all that, because that is a variance between 19 and 20. So a chunk of that, which is about 8%.
Yeah, but if you look at every program and that everybody that runs SLP1, you got a big old wide thing going as far as reimbursement. I didn't know if there's a range or something. And then on Mentor on page 60.
Yeah, it's the people.
What is a day service add-on? It's not listed on anybody else's contract.
Go ahead.
That's for a therapeutic family home, where it's basically a CTH1 environment. And then if the person lives in that home, goes to a day program, we give them a day add-on. And then the day program will actually bill Mentor for the day activity.
But it says no people. Day service add-on, last year it was 27,000, this year's 86,000, so that's 58,000 different.
He's got the same.
And I don't know what that is, but,
Well, they just,
shouldn't we be saying it's at least serving that one person, if that's what it is?
No, that's more than one person.
It's on page 60.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Okay.
Part of that's going to be the increase in the rates from the salary increases, but I have to check, see what the other difference is.
Lord, that would be a big increase. It couldn't be, Yeah, well, could you check on that?
Okay.
And then on page 42, y'all write that Lawrence County contract renewed for 3 months.
Caregiver
Case
relief.
manager?
Caregiver.
No. Under page 42, there's a note at the bottom, an asterisk, and it says contract renewed for 3 months. And it's case management.
Should have been on caregiver relief.
Sorry, caregiver relief program.
Okay.
It's on the wrong line.
Okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
Any
I'm
other?
thinking what's gonna happen to the other.
It started with a C, that's why. looked for the first C and went, oh, that must be.
Oh, well, you know, it happens, but I get it. Thank you, that's all.
All right, anybody else have any other questions? Can I get a motion?
I have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Regarding special contracts on page 11, how often are special contracts brought to the board? How, like,
Only
is
if
there
they're
any, are there any guidelines or around the contracts, like we review one a year, or we award one a year? Or like, what's the, I guess, frequency of the contracts? And I mean, it's hard to tell from this, like how long these contracts are, but I don't know, just
I
knowledge
believe
on.
they come to you annually at this point, unless we have a change. So I would anticipate in 3 months, we're going to be coming back to you with some contract changes. Now, there's a $200,000 spending limit, but I would think that if we're doing a special contract, that y'all should know about it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter to me what the cost is. Yeah, you should have known about these things. So we're reviewing them right now, so we'll probably bring them to you a little more during this year as we say this needs to stop or we need to continue.
Okay, I guess another question I have is, are these contracts generated, by your staff, and are there requests that come in? Is there someone like reviewing these requests? I was just trying to get a sense of like, when we do a contract, is it as a result of someone coming to us and asking us to do this, kind of like in a grant kind of format way, or is it just, hey, we see a need in this area and I don't know, I'm just trying.
No, I'm trying to think of how to answer this because I
it's
think in
both
the
ways.
past it's been however. I mean, whichever way it was just coming and going. I would like to bring more of a formal process to it. Especially, and a lot of the different grants and the different, why providers have all these different types of programs has to do with the fact that we don't have a graduated acuity-based set way of looking at our individuals. So if someone new comes in the system and you got to get them served, that could generate a contract just on one person. Where I think that SLP1 program you're talking about, I believe that's about the individuals that reside there and their particular needs. So that generated a contract that was separate from your normal SLP1 band. So, and I think your question is very timely because that's exactly what we're looking at. As you get down the road of where you have more exceptions than you have rule, it is time to redo your whole system, and that's where we're going. The case management is the first move, and then after that, we are looking at all the bands so that the individuals, instead of having a separate contact for it's about the individual. What do they need to be supported? And how do we actually come up with that number? So that's what we're going to be working with, probably over the next 18 months. But your question is timely. Okay. We are looking at all these contracts, and that's what we're doing right now.
And none of these have originated in the last several years.
No.
They're very historic,
Yes,
been around legacy grants. And so Pat and Mary and Susan and others are spending a lot of time analyzing these.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion to approve? Excuse me.
We'll have the explanations next month.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Sale of property. Community comprehensive, community provider contracts, Chris. Is that not you? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Comprehensive
property.
Nancy Hall? Oh, sorry, Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. If you'll turn to tab 8 in your notebooks, I'm here to present for your consideration for approval 4 CPEP projects for the regional centers for this coming year. The first one is in Dorm 205 at Whitten. We need to replace the VAV terminals and the EM controls, which are part of the entire HVAC replacement system, at a total of $275,000. This, we will continue to use existing piping. Everything will be continued to reroute to that and connected to that, but we do need to replace the 25-year-old variables for the air volume in that project. And we'll continue going unless you have questions. Number 2 is a statewide project for all regional centers. R22 is a refrigerant that we use now. In 2020, it will no longer be made. and we have to look at how we're gonna move forward with that. It's actually part of a Montreal protocol, which is an international plan, and it's because of the EPA has said that we can't use R22 anymore. And so we're gonna start a statewide project, if you approve it, to move forward in replacing those systems, because R22 after next year will no longer be made. The next one is replacing the 2 emergency generators, which run 8 residences at Midland Center. They're very large generators. One is 27 years old, and the recommendation for these generators is only 19 years old. And so we would like to replace those 2 generators, which run 8 buildings at Midland Center.
Does FEMA not help us with this?
No, they haven't, other than being part of the mitigation grant, we were able to get a generator at PD Center. And I believe Andrew's going to talk about that.
All right.
Okay. And last but not least is Coastal Center has a dorm 110, which the generator is not really large enough to run the entire systems, HVAC system in the entire building. So 210 currently has a larger one. So we want to kind of move that one and then replace the other one. If you'll see, the 210 generator is 32 years old. And so we're going to move the one from 110, if you approve it, and then replace the one at 110 so it will run the entire building.
How old's the one at 110?
It says 2008.
Yeah, it's a 2008 one.
Okay, 2008, gotcha, I missed that,
Yeah, and the other one is 32 years old.
Whew. Anybody have any other questions?
When projects like this are done, what's the state protocol on bids for different providers or companies that will do this work? Like, is there
There is a bidding process.
Okay, gotcha.
Y'all hadn't done with all that?
And I guess these are the best bids, like the best, how do we choose?
No, we haven't bid yet. This is,
These are just estimates at this point for your consideration for us to start the process.
What they do
I
is
just
they
thought-
put this amount based on these prioritized needs on the spending plan.
Okay.
Which they'll make up from the agreements we make today. But there's a whole separate bid process.
That's right.
Okay, I just didn't know if this was like
No.
what you were saying.
No.
This is an actual
There's a whole
cost.
nother.
Yeah, this isn't the total cost.
Okay,
This is just-
gotcha. This is just what
These
you
aren't
think it
bid
may
yet.
be, and
We-
can we go look
and-
at it?
Yeah,
Yeah, and next month, we're gonna look at.
you'll get a
getting,
bid process.
The bidding process, some of the numbers have changed. So as to how much at what point do you have to do a bid, how many bids you have to get, and different projects, because the numbers have all changed with, what is that? What is the?
yeah.
There you go. So it is the,
State procurement.
State
Service
procurement.
management office.
Okay, great.
So they just sent out a new bulletin,
Yeah.
so we can, we'll update that, because we do
It takes
a couple of
forever.
things. Starting the new.
All right.
We start the process on October. Sometimes we don't get,
Listen to
maybe
my
sometimes
first.
we're lucky to get
Good to know.
bids.
Anybody else have any other questions? Can I get a motion?
I will make a motion that we approve the permanent improvement plan this year.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye, great.
Thank you.
All right, sale of property, Pat Maley.
I have a request to consider surplusing property. In
She's from York.
1985, we were deeded, we're approved 2 lots in York County, totaling 1.6 acres. 2019, a York County realtor called us and said they wanted to buy them. We
Whoa,
looked on our books and we didn't have them on our books. So we did the legal research and we do in fact own them. We have no reason to develop them, so we just want to surplus them and sell them and get your approval to sell them on the open market. The appraisal value for these 2 lots is $20,000. And if you approve, the receipt of the property will cover our sales cost and we'll split it with the state.
Do you have an address on those properties?
I have
Diane.
lots 2 and 3, Diane Road, York, South Carolina.
and you're okay back there?
I'm just sitting here thinking, I don't know where it is yet.
Oh, okay, all right. I was gonna ask you if you had anything to say about it. That's why I was out there. You have any?
Maybe there's a reason I came today.
I just want to ask this, didn't the football team or something.
Or the Panthers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't think of their name. But
She's a real sports.
this appraisal was done in 2019. This wouldn't happen to be in any area that
No.
the value could go up.
If it's in York, it's
not
40
part
miles
of,
away.
it's 40
from where
miles
the
away
Panthers
from where the Panthers are gonna be.
Yeah, if
We
this
couldn't
is-
get more than 20.
No, but I don't know that, but I can tell you that I don't think it won't have any effect on anything in York.
Not in York.
Where is Diane?
I'm trying, that's what I'm.
You don't know it either.
I don't, I've never heard of it.
Right.
I mean,
Does anybody
if you
have
get
it?
more, go for it.
Yeah.
The appraisal, we still have to sell it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, somebody's interested in it.
Hey, York County's booming.
I have a motion to sell it.
So maybe.
Okay, with back in the back row? York, you okay? All those in favor? Okay, great, thank you. All right. I need case management update.
It's way
I
out.
tell you what now,
That's
Susan, you got a big job, because this case management is making me nervous in the service. So,
Nervous in the service.
yeah.
It's kind of a applicable
You don't have to do the good salesman's job for me.
mantra.
I think it's great, so, go
Well,
ahead.
it may become a team effort, so let's just see how it goes.
Great,
So
good.
we're in tab 10 of your binder. We have our monthly memo, including update on billing efficiencies. But I'll just highlight a couple things and do a quick recap. So DHHS has chosen for us to implement waiver case management July 1st. And just to reorient ourselves to this a little bit, waiver case management is a good thing for people receiving waiver services because it provides increased contact. So case management services case managers have an opportunity to perform their role in even more comprehensive. Yes, ma'am.
And in addition, Medicaid targeted case management, we are doing billing underneath that title right now, and we're monitoring a waiver where that technically is not supposed to be done there. But it was the only place to bill it. So we've been doing that for all these years. That's why waiver case management was built, to specifically deal with our waivers. Okay.
Yeah, so it was customized, it's different for our waiver programs, and it provides that increased monthly contact. I apologize for you to have to turn your head to see behind you. Quarterly face-to-face contact, face-to-face in home every 6 months, and then also as people are transitioning in and out of hospitals, folks do, it gives them an opportunity to have better transition. So these are all positive advancements. I mean, there are always two sides to every coin, two ways to look at everything, but the way we see it as case management should be comprehensive. Folks should know who their case manager is. They should know what case management is so that they know it's assessment planning, referral, and linkage, and what they can get help with. And they should be linking to things beyond just waiver services, just the array that's in front of them. So with our training in person-centered thinking, that's going to provide an opportunity for waiver case managers and case managers in general to get to know their people better, document what their needs are, what supports are needed, and that provides more face-to-face time, more time that can also be billed legitimately to provide a more comprehensive service. So that's my positive outlook on this as we talk about a lot of the negatives. This really is a consumer-driven positive, a consumer-centered positive. So we've been through the process of vetting, and thank you all for approving those standards and the directive today. That's very appreciative since we're trying to implement July 1st. We have been in coordination with DHHS about the changes since the policy committee meeting, so I don't see any issues with them reapproving at this point. But again, thank you. We have already begun waiver case management training. We're pairing this with the authorization module training. We're doing a little bit with therapists to some more efficiencies with case managers, how they're going to be able to do the authorization piece coming. So our folks are on the road today. They're in Spartanburg. They've been to Florence. We'll have two trainings in Columbia, which we'll Skype. We'll record one of those. And then we'll have one at Coastal Center in Anderson. So we're trying to make it very accessible and timely, and we've received some positive feedback thus far about the training. We'll always continue to support case managers as they transition. So just another quick recap that the the whole issue here with the rate is that DHHS used their rate setting methodology to look at various factors to set up a market rate. And that market rate is different than what we've been paying, is that capitated monthly rate. So we're seeing a big shift in provider behavior, and we know that business plan, that behavior of case managers to make sure they're documenting everything is even more essential now, because case management will just be paid based on actual activity. So it really sets up a different kind of schema, and professionals have to behave differently to be able to adapt to that.
Since we talk so much about the rate and how the rate was set, Chris, do you have the documentation that we pulled from 2014?
Sure.
We had to, a lot of us were sitting at the table. So just take a moment to let folks know what was in that rate, because a lot of the stuff that was discussed today, actually, when you look back at the documentation from 2014, it was taken into consideration. So if you don't mind, I'm going to let Chris just say that, because it's a big issue.
So let me preface this comment with, I've been in the provider world for 25 plus years representing boards, and when this information came out, I was not real supportive of the rate and thought a lot of what others think. And so this week, I have obtained from HHS how they develop the rate, and just kind of we want to share this with the providers so they can see, because a lot of the things that are being said aren't included are. I don't know how we know what's not included and what is, because I don't think we've ever given anybody anything to make those types of statements, but.
Well, you call it non-billable in the standards, that's how, I guess.
Well, I'm just saying, from a rate development perspective, what is and is not included in the rate is what I'm going to address. So the base salary was $45,000 for a case manager. $7,500 for supervision, which is a 1-to-6 ratio supervision. So if you're in a supervisory structure that's more than that, if you're in a 1-to-3 or 1-to-4, of course, you're going to need a higher billing realization to pay for that. 34% fringe rate. I'm going to ask Susan to send me her computation of the 43% she came up with, because I'm doing the math in my head. And, you can get that high if a lot of people have full family health care, but you can't control that. So, typically when you're building fringe rates, you're looking at an average health benefit package, not everybody electing full family. So that can certainly throw your percentage out of whack. They got $6,000 for travel. The numbers quoted were $175 and $300 a month. There's $6,000 in there for that. That's reimbursement for vehicle cost. There's $1,100 and
Can I ask a question? Wait a minute. I thought there was not, no travel was.
There was.
Huh?
This is the cost.
This is how
So
we track.
there's time in here as well. I'm gonna get into the time aspect, so the actual time.
So they're going to pay him for the time too?
Well, you gotta compensate for the time.
Right.
But it's not billable. And then you gotta reimburse them or pay for the vehicle that the agencies.
So are they, okay, no,
So there's two pieces of the cost. You got the mileage reimbursement or
Right.
the vehicle cost.
but that's already in the rate.
Yes, and you got the non-productive billable time, which is also in the rate. It may not be inadequate. I'm just gonna give you everything.
Yeah,
It
okay.
might not be adequate.
Okay,
Let me give you the numbers.
all right.
So as far as office supplies and technology, there is $4,200 in there for internet or cell phone. I'm at $420. $300 to buy a computer every 3 years, and $400 for office supplies. So there's $1,120 in there for that. 10% administrative cost of $5,300. They used a base work week of 7.5 hours a day. If you actually work 8 hours a day, then these numbers are actually, the rate will actually be more favorable. So this is in the provider's advantage that they're using 37.5 hours. So instead of 2,080 possible hours a year, there's 1,950. 11 holidays are built into this model, 15 annual leave days, 15 sick leave days, 8 hours a week for travel time, an hour a week for training, or 1.5 weeks a year, 50 hours a year. 160 hours for documentation, it's non-billable, and 195 hours of just 10% fudge factor, like there might be other stuff that they can't bill. So they're only projecting 817 hours a year actually being where you could potentially bill, and that's their base. So almost 16 hours a week, they're assuming you don't even have a chance to bill. So only 24 hours a week is even potentially billable. So that's the number they're using to develop their rate. And their rate came up with $25.18, which they rounded up 2 cents, and then $15.45, they rounded up to $15.50. Now, they did leave out rent. What I did is I went back, we pulled FTE reports for 5 providers. The case management salaries are running, instead of 45,000, they're running 33 to 35. So there's 10 grand space there. Supervisory, I had an issue with what they use as well. They had $45,000 for a supervisor. Well, supervisors making the exact same thing as the people they're supervising? No. So I thought that was low. And then the rent was missing and some other things. So I went back and recomputed it myself using my numbers and actually came up with rates substantially lower than Medicaid has. So I went in and corrected the salary's a little high, the fringe is a little low, they left this out, they didn't put enough there. I went back and redid all the math myself and came up with less per unit rate than what Medicaid did.
Do you know what the average salary for a case manager is in South Carolina who's not an RN, a non-RN case manager? It's
There's RN.
42,000.
I didn't know it was RN case manager.
Well, they're a different breed, but this is a non-RN case manager, and the average salary is 42,000. If you are stuck in the state retirement program and you can't get out, then you're looking at over $50,000 for that person. So, and we're requiring them either to have case management experience or experience with the target population. So we're going to have to bring them to an organization knowing that the average salary in South Carolina is $42,000 a year for that position. What we have to focus on here is not how the rate was calculated 5 years ago, because it's irrelevant. What we have to focus on is whether we can make it based on what we're allowed to bill for, and make sure that we go in there strong and circle together and say, we need to be able to bill more for travel times.
Right.
We need to be able to bill more for admin costs.
Right.
And that is exactly the position that we all need to take, united.
I mean, what I see here is, how in the world do you have 5 people or 4 people who got up here today and said, this is what we do for a living, we do it every single day, and they say there's no way in God's gift we can make it.
So
I mean,
the representation made today where the rate's not adequate. That's what I'm addressing.
well, obviously.
So we're just telling you how the rate was made.
I understand that, but what I want to know is, why hasn't everybody gotten together and said, listen, if we've got people here who've told me, and I've been hearing it and hearing it and hearing it and hearing it, we're not going to make it. My job, my company will completely go out of business. And then we have 46 people going, and I've been writing it down. I go, why have we not gotten together with these people and said, yo, let's get together and figure out what we can do to make this work? You know, this is a big part of our job. And, you know, if we all want a job here, I mean, we've got to figure it out. And I don't understand why we hadn't all gotten together to figure out what we're doing, because obviously we got a major problem.
In April 2018, providers were billing at 31% efficiency. That means they were billing 31% of their day. Therein lies the problem. It's not a rate issue, it's a productivity issue. And Chris was explaining to you what went into the rate. They gave all these hours. If case managers are traveling more than what that travel time that was allowed, we can address that. But when we sat at the table, and the providers that were in this room, sans one, were there during that time when we were talking about how this rate was built. So even if you're saying that the average salary is $42,000, they said 45. So we're even meeting that in the rate.
No, you're not. Not with the fringe benefits.
Not with fringes.
And then that would exclude
It's
any other, that would exclude any other stuff. But what I just heard you say was, we can talk about travel time. Didn't you just say?
We say, we should, if we need to.
Okay, we need to.
Obviously, we gotta talk about something
But
because
we've
we're
been
gonna go broke.
asking, but we've been asking for numbers. Tell us how much time do you spend on the road? How much time for travel was in there? 16 hours a week?
I think it was 8 hours a week.
Okay, 8 hours a week. So are you driving more than, some of them are not driving anywhere near 8 hours a week, and some of them are driving
You're going on
more.
a premise of a rate now that was established 5 years ago. And we're not gonna solve this today. I'm just asking everybody, if we know there's a negotiation point that, you know, if we, with HHS, they're willing to work with us, and we know that they feel like their hands are tied on the rate itself, there is a possibility that if we approach this differently but united, that we can go in for things that might salvage some of these smaller rural programs and, you know, start with travel time.
Yeah.
So.
And I agree with Vicki. I mean, the point being not that, I mean, DHHS has taken a position of we can't adjust X, but if we can get them to adjust Y that lets us get more out of X,
Yeah.
then it doesn't hurt to ask, right? I mean, I think that's the point that we're at.
But
I mean,
it looks-
what's the worst case? They say, no, we're sticking with what we got. Okay, and then that's it. But if we can address what John said and say, get something more out of it, where Y is now, we can now apply Y to X and increase that number that they're getting. I don't see any negative.
Seems to me that we all got to get together and figure out this problem, because if not, we're not gonna have a problem with all we go on. You know, we're not gonna be doing, you know, our jobs will all be eliminated, and we'll have a whole lot of people screaming and hollering and yelling, because I've already gotten people screaming and hollering and yelling. So what I was hoping that, y'all gonna all get together and work it out. Because obviously we have some providers who are having a hell of a time and they do not feel they can do it. We think I mean, you know, the staff here says, oh yeah, we can do it, but they're not doing it every day. I think we've got to do something about it. Vicki said, because when I went and talked to Josh, he said, no, the rate is rate is rate is rate is rate. And I said, you know, Josh, but you still got a major problem. And he says, yeah. But Vicki went to talk to him. She said, well, what about travel? He said, he is willing to work on some things. So I think if we have got to do something, we're going to have a major problem July 1, especially if we lose somebody who's a private provider, who's in a nonprofit, and she's out of business in 3 months. How stupid do we look? You know, we need to do something. I mean, you know, that's just my suggestion.
I'd be analyzing, since supervision was put at a certain number, I'd be analyzing that if I have too many FTEs in my organization that are not producing, that I've got on the backs of these case managers, I have to pay for 6 people that are not producing, then my organization is set up wrong. We've got small providers that have 2 case managers and one's being paid as a supervisor. The supervisor rate is 1 to 6. You don't need a supervisor when you only have 2 case managers. So that's the stuff that has to be looked at. I mean, what organization should have a supervisor for 2 people? I mean, that's what the executive director should do if you're that small.
These are not exclusive. I mean, to me, we attack this at every level. So it's not a zero-sum game. We increase efficiency, just like Mayor's talked about, but there's no reason not to try to widen out that billable pie. I mean, by doing both, it makes it easier. And the best case scenario is we get super efficient, we've added in, and suddenly they're making more money. I'm just, my opinion on this is you attack it in every possible way without saying no to any idea. Dealing with DHHS's unflexibility in area A, but if they've indicated any flexibility in area B, we do both. Right?
Go ahead.
Glad to talk to you.
All right.
Do we know what the case management rates are in other states?
It is the same as ours in North Carolina. I looked it up.
As our old rate, our current rate?
As our current rate.
You mean the new rate?
Yeah, that's what, I only got to that one state, but I believe it was North Carolina. I think it was North Carolina, and it was exactly the same. It was at 25.15.
25.20.
But I don't know what they're billing for. And I don't know what their I don't know who operates it. Maybe it's conflict-free, maybe it's somebody with an existing infrastructure that makes it conflict-free, you know, which we're gonna have to worry about that problem in 2024. And we don't need to get to 2024 before we develop a transition plan for that. But I really do think that if there is any room to negotiate, and there is, I don't find DHHS, I didn't find Josh Baker in the least. I mean, he's very willing to negotiate.
And they're very open to the 2% salary.
Yeah,
We talked about that too.
But we as a commission, I think, need to try it and say, would you please work with us on this travel time? Because we are a very rural state. And
Well, that's what I'd like to know for some other rural states. What are they paying for waiver case management? I'd like to get that
We
data.
looked at that a number of years ago, and then, you know, we're aware that other programs using case management in our state are paid at a much lower rate than this as well. We could refresh that data. I remember Mary, when we were working on that in 2014, 15, we had all of that data for neighboring states, similar states, but it tends to be somewhat lower, but the standards could be different as well.
There's also like critical rates, like if someone's in a crisis, they have different rates for handling that, but it's very time limited. But there's just all different kinds of.
But in the past, even talking about the state plan autism rates and ABA, we talked with DHHS about eventually doing kind of a rural add-on, which I think would account for the lower caseload number due to extra travel, rather than counting travel time as a unit.
Yes.
And so I think that there might be some precedent that we can talk with them.
We've articulated that before, that he talks about the rural, the smaller counties, if they just don't have the numbers to generate the billing,
Yeah.
that there could be some sort of subsidy, but rather call it that than change rates per different counties and all that. It'll be more transparent that way as to what exactly it
I
is.
think we can go at it from what can we do?
And I think our position, what are we going for becomes even stronger if we can say, and oh, by the way, we're doing it at 85% efficiency now. I mean, if we go to them and say, we've come this far, work with us to get us over the line. I mean, I only think that's a positive that we attack it on me personally.
You have, three seasoned providers out here are telling me it's not going to work. And I mean, I think we need to all get together and figure it out, because we're going to, ultimately we're going to be out of a job. So.
People gotta get services.
So I think to Commissioner O'Mell's point, the providers have made a lot of progress, and I can talk about that next. But that progress doesn't undermine your points, which is, it is a challenge. We've got, things to overcome. We have things we can continue to improve on. But I will say, and to Evelyn's point, all the training and all the technical assistance that has been going on, and the different ways to look at it, and the points like Mary's had about supervision. Do you really need to pay a supervisor if you have two case managers? Do you have case managers that are performing at 10 to 15% of their week billable time? Why is that? What are you doing about that? What feedback are you giving them? Those I believe those elements all collectively, as well as the data that we keep sharing, can change behavior. And the data suggests that we have seen a change in behavior. In your binder, as I mentioned, you've got the memo, with charts in it. The sensitivity analysis chart that looks like this one shows, when we analyze it, that 75% of our BDSN waiver consumers are with providers and are billing at over their 60% of the current payments. A year ago, so May 2018, it was only 12%. So that's a significant change. The highest billing rate in May of 18 was 72.1%, and now nearly half of our consumers are with providers billing higher than that now. So it is possible to change, it is possible to build in efficiencies, it's possible to restructure. We've got more opportunity, just as a minimum requirement, to make contact to then get more units. So there are some assumptions there that the service is exactly the same as it was. It really isn't. The service is different. So there are additional gains that we believe can be made in these. One question, I don't know if y'all have any questions about that first. One additional question that was asked through, I believe, other conversations in the commission meeting was, what is this rate change doing to the body of personnel that compose case management? So we looked at that a couple of different ways. The red line of demarcation is between April 18 and May 18, and that's really when we started the real visible discussions of this, we're ramping up, and so we started talking about that even more regularly, and have stayed on it since. What you see in this data, this comes from our IT system, and it says security credentials. Basically what that means is the case manager has to be entered into our system, and when they leave, they get taken out. So we looked at how many case managers were taken out. So you see actually more change before April 18 than you see after. So I can't really look at this data and see a positive trend that we're getting more terminations since we've been ramping up to case management. I don't think you would see a positive trend post that that red line either.
And this doesn't tell us anything about why somebody left.
No.
It's just-
You know,
They've been leaving for 20 years.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell us how many.
There's
Yeah,
always,
and I'm
well,
sure anybody who
There's a
knew
vacancy
it,
rate
they've known
built
it since
into
January, of course they're gonna.
anybody in the case management system,
You know.
turnover is an issue, training and ramping up is an issue. These are things we've heard for years. We know that to be true. This is typically an entry-level position. Case managers, you know, they'll say that, you know, people don't stay in this forever. So we looked at it another way. A survey was distributed to boards and PPLs providing case management. We had 20 of 26 providers reporting, so you've got to think about that in your sample. So about a 43% response rate. And again, we really don't have evidence of an increase here. The key on the side, the gray is termination, orange is retirement, and then blue is designated as resignation. We even asked the providers to tell us when people resigned, was it because of the increased requirements for waiver case management, and we didn't really have a consistent response of that happening, a significant response indicating that was happening. So again, another way to look at it, we just don't have an evidence to suggest that people are leaving the system in this time frame because of waiver case management changes. So that's the data that we have available at this time. I know you all probably want to talk about some other things, but we continue to provide technical assistance. We provide training and technical assistance to 28 providers. We've transitioned the 2 providers that said they can no longer provide case management, that being Fairfield and DSN Advocates. They have very small caseloads. That was no problem. The other case management providers in the area that families chose were very happy to take the cases, and that was handled well. Mary said Darlington is hiring a couple case managers now.
They were going to not do case management, and they decided to hire case managers and go. And they just want me to stop the phone calls of people wanting to take their cases from them. So I was like, okay, we'll give you a breathing space there.
So we did our first tier, you know, based on our sensitivity analysis sheet, our first tier of the providers that were performing under 60%, and then we went up another level, so we're providing the break-even analysis, technical assistance, really on-site, customized training, and technical support to those as well. So we will continue to do that post July 1 and monitor data carefully, but the next few months will tell us a lot.
Can I ask a question? I forgot your name, the lady from CDS.
Dana.
Yes, thank you. So are you guys just case management, or you also?
Yes, ma'am, just case management.
Just case management, okay, so you got no other service to rob from?
Correct.
How many case managers do you guys have?
We have 17 case managers.
Okay.
And we serve about 1,000 clients.
Okay.
But how many FTEs do you have, Dana?
In our entire program, we have 30 FTEs, but a lot of, about 10 of us are dedicated to the traditional side of our nonprofit in that mission, which is the fundraising. We just can't fundraise an additional $27,000 a month.
And so when you said, the chart you gave us was the 100% line, and you said that your case managers could not generate enough billing units to hit that mark.
Right.
Why is that?
You know, I'm not a case manager, I can't speak to that, but I've got an incredible team who have been busting their tails. We were one of those who, in those early slides, and this time last year, we were only producing at 30%. We just did not push our teams, but we have utilized all the technical assistance, we've been utilizing all the tips and the trainings, and we've gotten it up to 75%. We are incredibly proud of our team, but they're also burning out. My high producers are burning out. Our highest producer we have is working 60-hour weeks, and that is not sustainable. And we shouldn't have to push our case managers 60 hours a week just to try to make the 100% mark. Then we're also having overtime. We will start having them drop off just because they're completely burned out. So they are really frustrated. I'm having a hard time keeping them motivated. I'm very grateful that they're all still in it because of the passion that they have for the families we serve, and that's what's driving them to keep going. They don't want to lose their client load. They love their clients, and the clients love them. It's just very disheartening to see our staff bust their tails and still not make the mark, and we're still going to have to close.
You know, you have to realize that when you're managing, if you've got high producers that are busting their butt, what are the other folks doing? If you've got people not doing what they're supposed to do, if you're billing at 20 and 30 and 40%, what are they doing with the rest of their day? That has to be addressed. I think that's the hardest part of this whole thing, is to realize that you can't balance an agency on the backs of a couple of high producers. It has to be, that has to be a job expectation. And then also you have to look at the total number of FTEs you have and how many non-producers are you balancing on the backs of your producers. That's got to be leveled out. That goes into overtime.
Well, our high producers are also those who don't have small children at home. And the ones in the bell curve, and we have a bell curve of our high producers and the ones who have taken more vacation or they have a couple health issues that we're working with them on. But the middle section, those are the ones who are trying to get everything done in an 8 to 5 or a 40-hour week so they can still have a family to go home to, so that they can still
have a life,
be a dad.
What about the other point that Mary raises with the non-producer, the non-billers in your organization? So if you have 17 case managers and 30 FTEs, that's 13 people in the organization who don't bill. Is that right?
Correct, because we serve another 8,000 children in what we do in our nonprofit. Yes, ma'am.
What does that mean?
So we have 8,000 children that come to our facility every day. We have therapies. We have partners in the building who do therapies, and we have a legal team, partners in the building. They are not employed by us, but we have to manage that partnership. We have collaborative meetings. We have reception coverage for those partner entities, and that's the original intent of when we were established 20 years ago. So that part of our business was funded and began by the United Way and in the community to support a need. We added case management to continue when the children age out of our original program. Case management continues to help coordinate some services. And now we can't rob from the original mission to just sustain case management.
CDS stepped up and took over Thrive when they decided not to do case management anymore from Greenville. When Greenville decided not to do case management, CDS stepped up and just took the whole program, lock, stock, and barrel. And I bet you took salaries too. Did you take everybody as they were?
We did. Yeah, everybody as they came.
They had some long-term employees that if they had started this up by themselves, they wouldn't have been at that cost. That is true.
All right.
Okay.
So hopefully we can all work on this. Any other discussion about it or go on to, this is the saddest part is our waiting list.
So we can shut.
2 minutes.
Hmm?
Minute and 30 seconds.
I know, Chairman Ravenel, you wanted this report to be short.
I just go to the last page.
Chase to the last page.
Yeah.
Which looks like this one.
Yeah.
Which is the summary of waiting list as of the end of May. So you'll see our critical needs. We sit at 75 people who've been identified as critical needs that are actively being worked to determine if we can serve their needs in our system, match them with providers as best available if residential rehabilitation is necessary. And then, as you know, in other report sheets that came in front of this one, we've broken down the IGRD waiver and community supports waiver waiting list numbers to better reflect that number. Combining the 9,178 and 6,140 can be a little bit deceiving because there are people within that list that are already in a waiver who've declined the waiver many times. Over the last 4 years, they've closed cases or they do have active Medicaid, so they're getting other services. So that shrinks that combined number to about 2,596 instead of what it looks like it is about 15,000. And at the current time, we do not have a head and spinal cord injury waiver waiting list. We haven't for some time, and we're closely monitoring that.
Can I ask one question? And y'all might not know, how many beds do we have open that we could put people in if we, Rufus, tell me that. That drives me absolutely to drink.
On average, we run about, anywhere from 65 to 70 beds a month over the various settings.
Open.
Open. And why, you gotta answer this for me. It's my last gasp. Why don't we have them all filled every month?
Lots of issues. Providers are working hard to fill them, but the compatibility issues. A lot of the folks on the critical needs list are very challenged individuals, and it takes a special provider with who's willing to take on a lot of risk, to serve that population. And, but providers are very responsive to our needs to screen. It's just a matter of there's a lot that goes into serving somebody residentially.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you, and I'm sorry I cut you late. All right. Consideration of bids, Mr. Andrew Theron. Joan who? Joan? Oh, good.
Good afternoon.
Hey, I don't think I've met you before.
I have not. No.
So tell us all about you.
I'm new to the game, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Andrew Theron. I'm a licensed engineer.
Oh, good.
With the state of South Carolina. I've been with the agency here for 8 years now.
So did you take over Jones?
I have, yeah. I've recently taken over as the interim director for engineering, and I'm honored to represent the agency in this position. And want to thank Rufus and Pat and recently Chris for their support.
Great.
Look forward to working with them in the future. So.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to have you here.
You left me out, Andrew, but that's okay. Not taking notes on that.
But anyways, I'm here today to present the consideration of bids for 2 generator projects we've got going on. And to address your point from earlier, these are our projects that have bid out, and we're ready to go with them if you have approved today.
Okay.
The first one here is Hillside 220 and 320 generator upgrades. Currently, both Coastal Center, Hillside 220 and 320 dorms are served by a single 130 kilowatt generator. However, neither building's emergency power needs are fully met. The project scope for this one includes the installation of a new generator to provide backup power to Hillside 220. Hillside 220 will receive a new 125 kW natural gas powered generator. Hillside 320 will be fully powered by the existing generator that's there now. The work performed will provide reliable and continuous power for 2 special needs dorms during the emergency situations. Bids from 3 contractors were received on Tuesday, June 11th, 2019. As the lowest responsive bidder, it's recommended that we contract with LC's Electric of Chapin, South Carolina, in the amount of $124,960. While no problem with anticipated, permission is requested to award to the second low bidder should the first low bidder be determined non-responsive. So that's the first one we've got here, and honestly, I don't know if y'all typically
We take them,
under $200,000.
no, we don't take anything under $200,000.
This was in my stack, so I did a consideration for it. So I just presented.
We know generators are your particular.
Well, we're getting ready to have a nice hurricane. Anybody have any other questions about this? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Well, thank you very much.
Well, there is a second one here.
Okay.
This is the FEMA generator, so to touch on the FEMA situation.
Oh, good.
This project includes the installation of new emergency generators at 3 sites. This is the 7th group that's bid, leaving no remaining sites. The design will procure for 23 statewide locations that will provide reliable and continuous power for special needs shelters during emergency situations. We've got the Fairfield Day Program will receive a 125 kW diesel generator. Williamsburg Day Activity will receive a 100 kW diesel generator. And PD Center Gymnasium Complex will receive a 125 kW natural gas generator. Alternates for these projects include control packages, which are important features that will assist the local disabilities and special needs board with the routine exercise maintenance and records keeping for these generators that is required. Cost at each location will be shared by DDSN and FEMA and the FEMA Federal Mitigation Grant Program. DDSN is a sub-recipient of the FEMA grant awarded to South Carolina Emergency Management Division. Bids for these, we've got 2 contractors that bid on this project. When bids were received on Tuesday, June 11th, 2019. As the lowest responsive bidder, it is recommended that a contract be awarded to DMB Electric of West Columbia to include all 3 location base bids and all 3 location alternates for a total contract price of $413,237. While no problem is anticipated, permission is requested to award to the second low bidder if the first one is determined to be non-responsive.
Great.
That's all I got.
Y'all have any questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. So glad to have you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Pat,
It's 12:15 and I will be
go
wide
ahead.
open.
I just saw one person sleeping back there. I
That's
saw
all right.
one.
The first
He
part,
left.
the purpose of my presentation is we need commission's approval to cancel 5 state-funded direct services contracts because obviously anytime we cut services, we need your approval. But these 5 contracts were in the scope of looking at 23 contracts.
Right.
We looked at 23 contracts totaling $3.1 million. And to direct, Robin made the question, how do we get contracts? The answer is, once they get in, they roll over forever. And our job was to look at them, to revalidate them, to re-justify them, and we should do that. We should do that on a regular basis, just be fiduciaries of taxpayers' money. I think we did it this year for more reasons. One, as Chris talked about earlier, we're ending the year on fumes. We have like $0 reserves for a $700 million operation, and we need to start managing ourselves in a more rigorous way. So we look at these contracts, and these were contracts on the year on our books for years and years and years. And so we started in January and February. We looked at all the contracts. We had audit teams go out, talk to the actual recipients, and we ended up taking these 23 contracts and we put them into 3 categories, and Mary approved. We're going to maintain about 1 million of them, which is 34%. We're going to eliminate 1.4 million, which was 45%, and we're going to maintain 635,000 with reforms. My presentation today is just to focus on the 5 that are eliminating services. I have a memo and all the details that Commissioner Thompson will like. I'll give you a schedule. We can talk about them all because I know it interests you.
Nice
But the
job.
time for 12-15 pressure, I'll just focus on these 5. Caregiver relief, we're recommending canceling a $75,000 contract. This is a legacy program that was initiated during the recession when we were literally taking waiver slots out of the system. And it was a program in order to provide some relief to non-waiver consumers to give them group respite. Well, obviously that mission somewhat ended. We have thousands of waivers over the last 4 or 5 years, And the providers that have had it, a lot of them just turned it back in because they didn't have enough participation. And so in 16, we had 13 providers, we spent $400,000, and now we have 2 providers and we spent $75,000. We've worked with those providers, and obviously there's still people in these programs. One's a little bit more robust than the other, and so what we decided to do was to find a transition plan. So we have extended these for 90 days into this fiscal year, and we're going to identify the people in the programs. And if they truly have respite type needs, we have family support programs within the system to address them. So we just want to end the program and address those residual people still in the system with family supports. The second state-funded program, we call it Vocational Rehabilitation Grants. We funded 3 FTEs, one in Charleston, one in Babcock, one in Greenville. These were state-funded positions. They were connected to the HASKI drop-in centers, and their focus was on employment opportunities for HASKI consumers. As we revisited this, these were state funds. We determined that basically employment services is part of the HASKI waiver. And so these services can be obtained through waiver services, Medicaid matched, and we felt like continuing this state-funded idea, which probably when it was initiated 10, 12 years ago, has just outlived its usefulness. Walgreens employment, $202,000. Again, that was a robust program at one time. Since its initiation, we went up there and audited it, and what we found was vocational rehabilitation has really got a grip on education. Anybody in high school, they have a monopoly. And this program used to use that as a feeder system in high schools, and Voc Rehab took over that responsibility. And so the Walgreens program, we still have 12 consumers that are working there that have been hired many, many years ago. But last year, they only hired 1 part-time person, and we gave them $200,000. And they were sitting on $140,000 from prior years that they hadn't spent. So we determined that it's just not cost-effective, and we decided we were going to give them a $10,000 grant, which will allow them to provide employment follow-on for the 12 that are still at Walgreens for as long as they're there. The 4th project is $29,000 for 2 grants to Chesco and Florence. And these were legacy grants for services to consumers who were in nursing homes. And that's another Medicaid funded program. We felt like that was just a one type issue that was just not fair to the entire system. And the last one was a $67,000 grant to UCPA Day Program Pilot. When we checked on that, there was no reporting, and the substance of supporting the day program was just had lost its form over the years, and we felt like that was not justified. So in summary, we're required to do 5 state contracts totaling $486,000, which if we turn them for Medicaid services is $1.6 million. So we recommend that we eliminate these so that we can redirect the money internally.
Does anybody have any questions?
I'll make a motion that we accept the reductions.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. All right, the nominating committee, the elections of officers, Vicki Thompson.
Yes. Okay, so the nominating committee would like to recommend the following slate of officers for fiscal year 1920. President, Gary LaMelle. Vice President,
Lane away.
we're not president.
Two chairs. Two chairs.
Gary LaMelle. Vice Chairman, Vicki Thompson. Secretary, Lori Unum.
Do I have any discussion? I'd like to make a motion to elect by acclamation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Gary, thank you very much. I have a little, since this is my last guest, I had a little thing to say. I want to thank you for taking the job. It was, we have all been here, Vicki and Gary and I think I've been here for 7 years. They've been here for 6 years. But I just want to tell everyone how much I've enjoyed being on the board. Hopefully go off as soon as they get my replacement. And being on the chair for the last years. I have enjoyed working with everyone, especially DDSN here in Columbia and also around the state, because I've got to go around the state, which has been wonderful. Sadly, since I've been here, I've realized there's so much more that we need to do. Some of the things I've tried to do as lower the waiting list, I haven't done. But I do feel understand more about the waiting list, and that's all. It's better that we have a better understanding of what we're doing, and how long it also takes for us to get off of that waiting list. This job has made me realize that the enormous and ever-increasing workload that we have here. Thank you so much for your support and understanding over the last few years, and keep working hard to enrich the lives of the people we serve. Thank you. Right.
Happy birthday tomorrow.
Oh, God, please. Thank you. We're supposed to be forgetting those
At a certain point.
State Director's report.
Okay. Again, most of the stuff that used to be on my report, we discussed in business, the business section there. I do want to know that we gave DHHS information on Wednesday for them, I guess Tuesday, to consider the 2% increase for the market-based rate, even though we know we're in a hybrid system right now. Initially, they said they weren't going to do that, but he is looking at that. So we figured out it's not going to be that much of an increase, but it will be an increase. And then those folks, we can't distribute that 2% increase or the compression or basically the dollar or anything until we get the money from the state. So providers, we've told providers that if you've got cash, you can give the rate, you can give the raise to your folks on the first paycheck, but if you don't, you can do retroactive payment, which lots of folks do. The Office of Inspector General, and their mission is to protect the integrity of Department of Health and Human Services programs, as well as the health and welfare program beneficiaries. We've just provided them with a lot more information on a criteria they had sent us to look. What they're looking at is our reporting system for the for IMS. Basically, if we have critical cases, A&Es, that we follow through on reporting, and that there's a kind of end result, and that we can show that there's a continuum of intervention during that time. So we've answered some questions for them because every system is different, and given them the information. The state, in order to complete its comprehensive annual financial report, has a couple of state auditors sitting downstairs, met them yesterday. Testing a list of agreed upon procedures. Actually, they tell us what those things are. We don't get to agree on them. They tell us and we say, oh, that's fine. And then that provides the state with a level of basic assurance that we're operating as we should be so they can complete their report. Our teams are finishing up the unannounced visits at the mentor programs as we wrap up the 6 months of programmatic review and data collection. We'll present the information to the commission in July for your review. As reported last month, organizational changes are underway here. We're trying to marshal our resources. I guess I'm getting Pat's language. And I didn't say rack 'em and stack 'em, but I do say that we're marshaling our resources where they're most needed, which again goes back to that we want form and function to go together. That includes putting the autism division out there in the field and the autism eligibility alongside the IDRD and HASCI eligibility to speed along the process and stop the backlog. Starting in July, I'll ask departmental heads to map out their departments with the discussion around form and function, one department at a time, with the purpose to give y'all an organizational overview, a little more insight into each department, and to help orientate new commission members to what the agency is. Also, next month will be the first executive directors meeting. We're going to meet the first month of the quarter to talk about all these big changes that are coming in, because this is just the first of many that we are pretty much mandated to do as we unwind this ban system and try to have more rules versus exceptions to them. And as our efforts, the collaborative efforts, Rob was talking about working with other agencies to help move that bill in the General Assembly. I'm meeting with the Department of Education, Molly Spearman, on the 26th to talk about training programs for individuals with disabilities in the school systems to mimic their tech track. What can we do to your tech programs so our students there can be actually learning some of that at whatever level they can so they can enter the employment world after graduation. The DSP certification is moving forward. We should have 2 programs up and running in August in York and Spartanburg. We are actually, no one faint. We're meeting with the executive team of the Department of Mental Health to talk about collaborative efforts with them to see if we can get their expertise to work with our dually diagnosed population, which is a really big step forward for us. And of course, we continue with DSS collaboration, and it's not just on the adults that are in protective custody, we're also working with them with the children. Their new director is pretty much into working with whoever he needs to work with to make sure these kids get served, which is wonderful. And I realize that some people think that I'm not listening to them about this case management issue, and this can't be further from the truth. I tried the same arguments we're talking about. It's not enough. It's not in the rate. It's not. I stopped arguing when I realized that we only bill 6 hours of case management per consumer last year. When I realized that we're up from 31% to 69% of billing efficiencies, which tells me we're interacting more with our families. That's what we should be doing. So, and from speaking to so many families, some of them in this room, I realize that our families are woefully ill-informed of the services they're receiving and the services they could be receiving. We focus so much on compliance and we focus so much on waiver. I actually had a case manager, a mom, tell me that the case manager said, you don't have any needs until your number comes up. And I'm like, there's plenty of needs outside the waiver in a community. So I think that at this time, we will talk about the rate development. We can hand out that sheet so you can see exactly what numbers were used. I know they were done in 2014. The actual dollar amounts and the hours that were used are relevant. They haven't changed because they were so generous back in 2014. What we need to do is we need to capture evidence as we move into this change. We need to actually log the miles and the time that we spend driving, realizing that driving in Charleston is going to be so much different than traveling in York because hours and miles are different in Charleston than they are in York. We need the actual data. Just getting up and saying it's not going to work is probably not going to be enough to change a data-driven agency's mind as to rate. I am more than happy to work with anybody to develop that data set that we need to collect to move on. We also need to realize that we are doing things differently, that we are now able to bill for people that are in the hospital. We couldn't do that before. If you go to jail, we will provide state-funded case management for you at that time. So we can continue, because we know how important it is to make sure someone's talking to that person. So there are lots of things. And if I'm a case manager with a lot of experience, I would say that if I got a letter, I know that I can't bill for reading the letter, but I sure can bill for informing that person as to what that letter's contents have and how important it is to them to follow that. We're also billing in a rate for enrollment. We've got like a per you do it kind of rate now. And we also have an agreement to get paid for when you're helping someone maintain their Medicaid, because everybody knows losing that Medicaid is a huge hit to every agency as well as the provider, and mostly to the individual because that's their insurance. So basically that's all I had to say. And thank you, Eva, for your service. I appreciate it.
Join us. Okay, so the next regular meeting will be July 18th. May I have a motion to adjourn? The motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't get to vote.